They say a mother's heart never truly hardens, but I learned that even a mother's love can bleed when it's taken for granted too many times. My name is Norma, and this is the story of how I lost everything I built, not to strangers but to the very person I gave my world to, my son Ethan. It began on a quiet morning like any other. The sun peeked through the lace curtains of my old home, painting golden patterns on the floorboards. I was humming to myself, making tea the way I always did for him. The same kitchen where I once made him birthday cakes now smelled like loneliness. Ethan had changed. The boy who once ran to me with scraped knees and wild laughter had grown distant, colder, sharper, as if life had hardened him before his time. But I didn't know that hardness was about to break me. He walked into the kitchen that morning, phone in hand, suit pressed, voice clipped. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. My hands froze over the teacup. I turned to him with a smile, the kind mothers use when they hope the problem is small. "Of course, dear. What is it?" He didn't sit. Didn't meet my eyes. "It's about the house," he said. "I've been thinking, it's too big for you now. You live alone, and it's expensive to maintain. I've already talked to an agent." Blinked. "An agent?" He sighed, impatient. "Yes, Mom. To sell the place." I felt the room tilt. The air thickened between us. "Sell it," I whispered. "But this house. This is your father's house. It's our home." He looked away. "It was, Mom. Things change." 2 words sharp enough to cut through 25 years of motherhood. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe he was stressed, maybe he didn't mean it that way. But the next few days proved otherwise. He stopped coming home for dinner. Calls went unanswered. And then one afternoon, a man in a gray suit showed up at my door with papers in his hand and a polite smile that felt like a dagger. "Mrs. Norma," he said, "your son asked me to handle the sale documents. He mentioned you've already agreed." My heart sank. Ethan hadn't even told me. He'd already decided. That night I waited for him. The clock ticked past midnight, and when he finally walked in, smelling of perfume that wasn't familiar, I tried to speak gently, the way mothers do when they're afraid to lose their child. "Ethan," I said softly, "I built this home with your father. Every corner here is a memory. If money's the problem, I can." "Mom," he interrupted sharply. "It's done. Stop being dramatic." I felt my throat close. "Dramatic?" He laughed, not cruelly but emptily. "You don't understand how the world works anymore. It's time you move into something smaller, maybe with a nurse. You're not getting any younger." For a moment I couldn't breathe. Not because of his words, but because I realized something deeper. My son didn't see me as his mother anymore. He saw me as a burden. The following week movers arrived. Boxes stacked like tombstones of a life being buried alive. I stood there, holding my late husband's photograph, as strangers carried away the walls that had once echoed with laughter and lullabies. When they left, Ethan handed me an envelope. "There's some money here. Use it to settle somewhere quiet. I'll visit when I can." He kissed my forehead, quick, mechanical, and turned away. And just like that I was out. Standing at the gate of my own home, suitcase in one hand, tears in the other. The streetlight flickered as if the world itself was ashamed of what it had witnessed. I wanted to scream, to call him back, to remind him of who I was, the woman who stayed awake through his fevers, who sacrificed her youth so he could have a future. But I didn't. Because a mother's dignity sometimes becomes her only shelter when everything else is taken. I found a small rented room near the old church. The walls were thin, the bed creaked, and the silence was deafening. Every night I stared at the window and asked myself, what did I do wrong? But with each passing day, the grief turned to something colder. Not hate, but a quiet kind of strength. Because deep down I knew. Life has a way of balancing its debts. And karma never forgets an unpaid one. Weeks later, I was walking home from the market when I saw him, Ethan, cross the street, laughing with someone, a woman I didn't know. She looked young, confident, with a kind of smile that could convince any man he still had time to live recklessly. I recognized that look. The same one that once drew my husband into ruin. My heart didn't ache this time. It observed quietly. Because sometimes, the best revenge is letting life show its mirror. I learned from whispers in town that Ethan had invested all his savings into a new business with that same woman. They said he'd sold not just my house, but everything he owned, chasing promises that glimmered too brightly to be real. And one rainy night I got the call. A familiar voice, trembling. "Mrs. Norma. I don't know how to say this. Then, he's lost everything." The woman, she disappeared with the money. Closed my eyes. Not in joy. Not in sadness. Just acceptance. The same rain that once washed away my tears now washed away the last of my pain. Because sometimes God doesn't punish. Teaches. And the lessons always come back to those who forget who gave them their first. I looked at the old photo frame, my son as a child in my arms, and whispered, "You can sell the house, Ethan, but you can't sell the love that built it." It had been 6 months since the day Ethan sold the house. 6 long months of silence. No calls. No visits. Just memories echoing in a room too small for everything I still felt. I had learned to live quietly. Woke up early, watered the little plants by my window, read old letters, prayed, and tried not to wonder what my son was doing. Because wondering always hurts more than knowing. Then one evening, as the sky bled orange into gray, I heard a knock on my door. Soft at first, then desperate. When I opened it, I didn't recognize him at first. The man standing there wasn't my son. He was thinner, older somehow. His eyes sunken with regret. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He looked like life had finally caught up to him. "Mom!" His voice cracked on that word, as if even his throat was ashamed of saying it. For a long moment I couldn't move. I just stared. At the same boy who once threw his toys across this floor, the same boy who'd once promised, "I'll take care of you forever." Now he couldn't even take care of himself. He stepped closer. "Please. I don't know where else to go. You took everything, Mom. The business, the money, even the apartment. I've got nothing left." I didn't say a word. My fingers tightened around the doorframe. Somewhere inside me the mother wanted to reach out, to pull him in, to tell him everything would be all right again. But another voice, one that had grown inside the silence he left me in, whispered, "Don't forget, Norma. Don't forget how it felt when he turned you away." He looked at me, tears glistening in his tired eyes. "I was wrong," he said. "I was blinded. I thought I knew better than you. I thought money could fill the spaces love used to live in. But I was wrong. I'm sorry, Mom." The wind carried the scent of rain again, the same as that night I lost everything. It was strange. How the same rain that once washed away my pain now carried his apology. I took a step forward. My voice was calm, steady, but it trembled at the edges. "Ethan, do you remember what you said to me the day you sold the house?" He nodded slowly, ashamed. "You told me I didn't understand how the world works anymore," I said. "And maybe you were right. Maybe I didn't. But the world you believed in, the one built on greed and pride, it collapsed faster than you imagined, didn't it?" He lowered his head. Tears slipped down his cheeks, one by one. "I don't want money, Mom. I just want you." That broke something in me. Not anger. Not resentment. Something softer, like a wall quietly crumbling. I opened the door wider. "Come in," I whispered. He hesitated, as if afraid I might change my mind. Then, like a lost child finding home after a storm, he stepped inside. For a moment it was quiet again. The same kind of quiet I'd once feared. But this time it didn't hurt. He sat on the couch, his eyes scanning the tiny room. The paint was cracked, the furniture mismatched. But it was mine, humble, peaceful, earned with dignity. He looked at me. "You live here." I smiled faintly. "Yes. It's small, but it's enough for me." He nodded, guilt washing over his face. "You deserved so much more." I poured him tea, the same way I did that morning before he broke my heart. The same chipped cup, the same gentle pour. When I handed it to him, he stared at it for a long time before whispering, "I don't deserve this." I looked at him softly. "No, Ethan. You don't deserve forgiveness. But love. Love doesn't wait for permission." He cried then. The kind of cry that shakes the soul free of pride. And I realized something. Sometimes karma doesn't destroy to punish. It destroys to rebuild. That night, as the rain tapped against the window, I watched my son sleeping on the couch. His face peaceful for the first time in years. Maybe we were both learning what love really meant. It wasn't about the house or the money or even the pain. It was about finding each other again, broken but human. And as I turned off the light, I whispered a quiet prayer. Thank you, God, for bringing my son home. Even if it took everything to do it. Morning light spilled through the window like forgiveness itself. Soft, hesitant, almost shy. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up alone. Ethan was already up, sitting by the window, staring at the small patch of sunlight warming the floor. He looked lost in thought, as if trying to remember what peace felt like. When he noticed I was awake, he stood up immediately. "Good morning, Mom." His voice was quiet, respectful, the kind of tone he hadn't used since he was a boy. "Morning," I replied, smiling faintly. "Did you sleep well?" He nodded. "Better than I have in months." Something about that made me feel both happy and sad. Happy that he was finally finding rest, and sad that life had to break him first to teach him its lessons. I made us breakfast. 2 slices of bread, a boiled egg and tea. He looked at the simple meal and sighed. "You're still living so humbly," he said, guilt swimming behind his eyes. I laughed softly. "I live simply, not sadly. There's a difference." He smiled, and for a moment I saw a flash of my boy again, the same child who used to draw me pictures with crooked hearts and say, "For you, Mama." We ate quietly, the only sounds being the clink of the spoon against the cup and the soft hum of the morning breeze. After breakfast, Ethan said he wanted to help me around the house. He fixed a leaking tap, cleaned the shelves, even replaced the bulb in the kitchen. It wasn't much, but watching him work with his hands, those same hands that once signed away our home, felt like healing. Every small act was a wordless apology. That evening we sat outside together. The sky turned golden. The air smelled like wet soil and jasmine. Ethan looked out toward the road and said, "I used to think success was measured by how far I could go. But I never realized home was the destination." I didn't reply. I just placed my hand on his, the way mothers do when words are no longer needed. Days passed. Then weeks. Ethan started working at a local store, trying to build something again. Not for himself this time, but for us. Every evening he'd come home tired, yet peaceful. He began saving money, repairing what was left of our life, one act of love at a time. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me quietly, as if wondering how I still managed to smile after everything. And I'd think, because forgiveness frees the one who gives it, not just the one who receives it. One night, as we were having dinner, Ethan suddenly said, "Mom, I found our house." Froze. He continued, "The new owners are selling it. I've been saving up. I want to buy it back for you. For us." Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. I whispered, "Ethan, I don't need that house anymore." He looked surprised. "But it's where everything began." I smiled softly. "No, son. Where everything began was right here, inside you and me. The house was just walls. We are the home." He didn't speak after that. He just reached across the table and held my hand. For the first time I could see not just my son, but the man he'd finally become. Weeks later he did it anyway. He bought that house back. Not as an act of pride, but as a symbol of redemption. When he handed me the keys I cried. Not for the house, but for the circle that had finally closed. The day we moved back in, I walked through every room slowly. The walls no longer whispered betrayal. They hummed forgiveness. Ethan had painted them new. bright, clean, hopeful. He'd even placed a small frame on the mantel, an old photo of me holding him as a baby. I smiled through my tears. "You've finally come home, my boy." He hugged me tightly, his voice breaking. "I'll never let you be alone again, Mom." And I believed him. Years passed. Ethan married again, this time to a kind, humble woman named Sarah. Together they rebuilt not just the house, but our family's spirit. They gave me a grandson, a boy with the same curious eyes Ethan once had. Some nights, I sit by the same window where I once cried, watching the boy run across the garden, laughing. Life had come full circle. One evening, Ethan came and sat beside me, holding 2 cups of tea. He said, "You know, Mom, I used to think karma was punishment. But now I see it's just God's way of teaching mercy." I looked at him, smiled gently, and said, "Karma doesn't punish, son. Corrects. And love, real love, waits quietly for that correction." He nodded, understanding. Then he asked, "Do you ever think about the past?" I looked at the sky, glowing pink and gold. "Sometimes," I said. "But not with pain anymore. With gratitude. Because every heartbreak was a teacher, every betrayal a mirror, and every ending a beginning." He smiled. "You always have a way of turning pain into wisdom." I chuckled softly. "That's what mothers do, Ethan. We bleed quietly, so our children can learn loudly." Now, as I sit here telling you this story, I realize something I wish I'd known sooner. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, but without letting the memory poison you. I forgave my son long before he returned. Because forgiveness isn't for the person who hurt you. It's for your own heart, so it can keep beating softly even after it's been broken. And as for karma, it isn't cruel. It's fair. It took everything from Ethan, not to destroy him, but to bring him back to himself. If you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, or left behind, remember this. Sometimes the ones who hurt you are sent to test how deeply you can love without losing yourself. And sometimes, the silence they leave behind becomes the soil where your strength finally grows. So this was my story. A story of pain, loss, and unexpected grace. A story about how even when the world turns its back on you, God listens. He always listens. So if you ever find yourself standing in the rain, watching someone you love walk away, don't chase them. Let the rain wash away your tears. Because someday, when the clouds clear, you'll realize that the home you were searching for was never a place. It was peace. And that peace was waiting inside you all along. In life, always love isn't perfect, but always patient. Where heartbreaks aren't endings, they're lessons. And where forgiveness is the truest form of revenge.